What is immediately noticeable about strongmen is that although they are huge, they very often give the impression of being overweight. Of course, there are exceptions such as Mariusz Pudzianowski or Derek Poundstone, but as a rule, the representatives of this discipline have a lot of fat in addition to muscle mass, and therefore not necessarily a good physique. In this material, I will try to answer why strongmen look like this and what advantages this brings. In other words, do you have to be obese to be that strong? The first explanation could be that they are big guys and like to eat a lot, and that extra fat doesn't affect their discipline in any way. They just don't care as much about their diet as they do about having enough energy to train. The fat here is an unintended side effect, and they don't care if they have a visible six-pack. They only care about how much strength they can bring to the next competition. This argument would be based on the assumption that the extra weight would not be the main benefit here, and that the diet would only serve to provide fuel for work. The claim that they like to eat a lot and don't care about their diet crumbles to dust when you first come across the footage of a whole day's food intake. The routine is striking, with a meal scheduled every 2.5 hours, and they often struggle to eat enough, which they don't seem happy about at all. However, this does not disprove the theory that it is just a source of energy for huge muscles that burn far more calories than the average person. Eddie Hall said that at the peak of his career, he measured how much pure muscle mass he had, 360 pounds or 163 kilograms. Admittedly, that's a slightly inflated figure, because he also said that he weighed 196 kilograms at the time and had exactly 22% body fat, which leaves 153 kilograms for the rest, and here you add the weight of the bones or internal organs. Either way, I believe he had about 130 kilograms of pure muscle mass, which is about 2.5 times that of the average man. Here you can make a comparison with an oven. A small oven burns less coal, but an oven 2.5 times the size consumes proportionally more. And you also have to take into account how hard your muscles have worked every day. This may simply mean that they are eating enough to feed the muscles, and at this point you have to ask yourself whether 22% body fat is a lot at all. Obesity is defined as a condition in which the proportion of body fat to body weight exceeds 25% in the case of men and 30% in the case of women. This means that Hall was not obese, but you should also be aware that the norm is 18%. Obviously, this looked like a lot more than 22%, but not necessarily caused by fat, but by water storage, for example. The second theory is that this fat is a side effect of trying to have as much muscle mass as possible. When do bodybuilders have the most muscles? Certainly not in the phase when their body fat percentage drops below 5% and before they start a serious reduction. A calorie deficit serves to improve the appearance of the body, but not to maintain or build muscle mass. In other words, fat can act as a protective shield for muscle mass in the case of strong men. With 20 to 30% body fat, they are sure to have as much muscle mass as possible so that they can maximize their strength potential. It can therefore be assumed that strong men are a bit like bodybuilders, who are not supposed to lose muscle as well as fat for competitions, but only concentrate on maximizing muscle mass, which requires an excess of calories that are not exclusively deposited as muscle, but also in the form of fat. In an article about sumo wrestlers and bodybuilders, I came across a very interesting statement. It quoted a study in which the amount of pure muscle mass of representatives of these two disciplines was compared. The bodybuilders had on average 20 kilograms more lean body mass than the average person, while the sumo athletes had almost 30 kilograms more. This means that they built up more muscle with food alone than the bodybuilders with specialized training. I think this is a pretty good explanation of why and how strongmen look like, but it's still worth looking at the benefits of more body weight itself. More kilos in competition, where heavy weights are involved, are of course very useful. First of all, the heavier athlete is in an advantageous leverage situation where he can simply use gravity and overplay the load. If we had two people pulling on a rope, one weighing 70 kilograms and the other 120, I would go for the heavier one without hesitation. Not even because he might be stronger, but because the ground pulls him harder and it's much more difficult to get him moving. Secondly, muscles and fat increase the size, and in the bench press, the bar touches the chest more quickly. With squats, the back of the calf and the back of the thigh meet faster and act like a suspension. So I see three main benefits of a high body fat percentage. The first is maximizing muscle mass, the second is the utilization of gravity, and the third is a shortened range of motion. However, strongman competitions are not just about static strength, but also about speed. It is obvious that a lean athlete can move more efficiently and dynamically and has an advantage in competitions that require these attributes. In addition, the waist circumference also plays a role, for example, when lifting stone balls, where athletes with a large waist circumference have difficulty embracing the ball firstly, and secondly, holding the weight further away from their center of gravity so that although they have more strength, they are likely to lose against a perhaps not so strong but leaner athlete. I found a great interview with Martin Licis, the world's strongest man of the year 2019, entitled, "Do you have to be fat to be strong?" And the answer is no. I have already mentioned one reason why this is the case. Licis agreed that a large mass leads to greater static strength because there are more muscles. But why was Mariusz Pudzianowski so successful? Because he was more dynamic and faster, and that's something fat doesn't contribute to. That was Steel Shock. See you in the next episode.